Citizens of YouTube, I come to you today with a heavy heart. I have terrible news. There's no easy way to break this to you, so I'll just tell you what happened. As I lay in bed late one night, an icy chill went down my spine. I felt my heart withering in my chest, and at that moment I knew, somehow I just knew, that I had become a gaming journalist. I'm not exactly sure what triggered the change. It must have happened somewhere between 17 and 18,000 subscribers, and I wish I could go back, but there's no going back now. It hasn't been easy. I now have an insatiable thirst for Mountain Dew game fuel that can never be fully quenched. In my daily life, I'm finding it harder and harder to use numbers lower than 7. But I'm not giving up. All I can do now is move forward and hope that with the support of friends and family I can somehow rebuild my life. And now that I'm a gaming journalist, it's only right that I do what we gaming journalists love to do more than anything else: gaze at my own navel. Part 1. Fix may not be the right word. Maybe I should have said mention. There are plenty of gaming magazines out there, and plenty of gaming websites, but I want to talk about one in particular, the Penny Arcade Report. Not because I hate it or because I want it to fail. In fact, as gaming websites go, I think it's one of the better ones. Instead, I'll be talking about it because it serves as a useful case study. You see, 8.5 million Google hits in a quarter of a second all agree games journalism is broken, and the PA report set about to fix it. It's a noble goal, an admission that journalism of any kind should be considered, at least in part, a public service, and a pledge to hold oneself to the professional standard that implies. And at first, everything seemed to be going well. Sometimes, however, the spirit is willing, but the site traffic is weak. In case you didn't already know, the PA report is attached to a webcomic named Penny Arcade, one that gets a lot of traffic. And soon, conspicuously placed links to PA report stories started appearing in the news posts that accompany each strip. Then, the editor posted this article asking readers not to crucify his site on a cross of ad-blocking software. I don't necessarily have a problem with this. I don't know how big their traffic was or is, and I don't blame them for trying to get more. But this whole sequence of events gave us a peek behind the curtain at how the incentive structure of ad revenue can influence content, and suggested the unsettling possibility that, on a long enough timeline, all ad-funded gaming websites will eventually become Kotaku. It's an alarming thought. What's more, games journalism shares a dynamic with every other kind of journalism, one in which favorable coverage is rewarded with access. Combine all this together and you have a recipe for failure. However, given all of these circumstances, I would say that the actual amount of failure is surprisingly low. Acknowledging the difficulty of assigning a binary value of broken or not broken to an entire profession, I'm going to go ahead and say that games journalism is not broken. That's not to say that there aren't problems. Reviewers who are too generous, editors who are too big-headed, writers who don't sufficiently disguise their plagiarism, the works. But there are hacks in every business. Expect journalism of any kind to be different and you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But the problems are not out of control. Reviewers may fail, but it's rare for a critical mass to fail all at the same time. Websites and magazines may carry water for the industry, but most of them don't carry that much. On the flip side, I get a sense of what's happening in the world of publishers and developers, and which games are good and bad. Publishers and developers get some free publicity, and the journalists themselves get a paycheck for doing something that they hopefully like. To the extent that we'll ever be able to fix game journalism, it'll mostly be fixed on our end, as we figure out which sites are crap and stop going to them. Part 2. Well, not quite. After all, games journalism is broken Google hits outnumber is not broken by more than 4-1. Apparently, something is wrong. You might have noticed this too. If you're like me, you may get frustrated with how repetitive coverage is, how you can go to 5 different sites and read 5 slightly different versions of the same review or preview. Does it feel like something is missing? Like something is conspicuously absent from the public discussion? Like something that should be there isn't there? It feels like that to me, too. However, I suspect that that thing you're looking for isn't journalism. It's academics. That's right, that kind. Almost every other art form has an academic retinue of some kind. Literature, movies, music, visual art, all of the above can be studied in some capacity or another in a university setting. But not games. With rare exceptions, games can only be studied in a trade school. A place that'll teach you how to write code, or make 3D models, or manage a pipeline. Practical, marketable skills, but not liberal arts in the classic sense of the term. And that's fine, but where are all the useless people? Where are the people who use words like deconstruction and intertextual and this one, which I try to avoid saying because I'm not sure how to pronounce it? Where are they? For the most part, they don't exist, because there are no existing institutions to support them, because academic study of this type has no immediate tangible commercial value, but that doesn't mean it has no value at all. Broadly speaking, games journalism exists to serve publishers, developers, and consumers. Academics in other contexts exist in large part to serve the medium. Journalism often assembles and reflects consensus. Academics encourages and rewards those who challenge consensus. Now, you may be thinking that this is just a semantic distinction. After all, journalists, or at least the good ones, sometimes meet the criteria in the right column as well as the left. But they have difficulty doing so, and that difficulty is due to the last crucial distinction. Journalism is fast and academics is slow. Remember the PA report and how they and all other sites need a certain amount of traffic to survive? Sensationalism and linkbait are one way to get traffic, but even if you don't stoop to that, you're still constrained by topicality and timeliness. A successful gaming website will put out several stories a day, almost all of them about recent or upcoming events. Random musings about whatever are not a recipe for ad revenue. I can tell you this from personal experience. Now that I have ads on my videos, I can't help but notice that my first one, whose subject was a hot topic at the time, has gotten way more views than, say, my review of a 30-year-old movie. But in my opinion, both these things have value, and only one meshes well with commercial interests and weekly deadlines. People often complain that academics are isolated in ivory towers, without remembering that we put them in those towers on purpose. For 1,000 years or more, academia has been deliberately isolated from the outside world in recognition of its value to the public and of the unique working conditions in which it thrives. Conditions where a doctoral candidate can spend years writing a thesis, and where people are free to spend entire lifetimes studying old things that no one cares about anymore. We could wait until Oxford University grants someone tenure based on his or her expertise on console RPGs of the late 20th century, but that's probably going to take a while. In the meantime, we need to find something that resembles the academic environment. Someplace where people seem to have endless amounts of free time, where everyone is long-winded, argumentative, and incorrigibly cliquish. Someplace obnoxiously elitist and frustratingly male-dominated. Have you guessed where I'm going with this? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the gaming academia. It was us. It was us all along. Part 3. At this time, I'd like to appoint myself as the spokesperson for the imaginary academic world I've just fabricated. The original subject of this video was journalism after all, and if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you're a successful gaming journalist who's desperate for my approval and eagerly awaiting my instructions. As I said before, games journalism is mostly not broken. But you could make it more than what it is, and here's how. First, every so often you should spend some time wading around in the muck and mire of the internet. I know message forums have a bad reputation, and that the signal-to-noise ratio is not good. But there is some real signal there, and people who, by virtue of not having deadlines, are working with an advantage you don't have. Second, occasionally write something that you have no guarantee anyone will want to read. There's no rush because there's no deadline, which gives you time to get into what John Cleese calls the open mode. I happen to like this talk of his, so I'm including a link in the video info. Finally, stay vigilant. The TF2 sniper teaches us that professionals have standards, and the same is true for journalists. Integrity is everyone's job, not everyone else's job, and the task of maintaining a culture of integrity is never finished. Go and do likewise. The medium would thank you if it could. Coming up, I'm gonna do that Mass Effect thing I talked about a few videos back. It won't take up all of my time, I'll still cover other things, but it will take some of it. Until then, me out.